In the first century, almost everyone walked where they were going on dirt roads, mostly wearing open-toed sandals. In dry weather, people's feet were covered in dust. In wet weather, covered in mud. The roads had animal and human waste on them and all manner of disgusting refuse. Entering a home for a meal on the floor at a low table, washing that grime off was conducive to purifying the body and not being offensive to others at the table. Because foot washing was such an unpleasant activity, especially before going into a holy space or the home of a higher status person. Someone of lower status was directed to wash people's feet, typically a slave. This was such an onerous, objectionable task, like cleaning a latrine today. Jewish slaves could exempt themselves from doing this kind of labor in Jewish households. The lowest of the low were forced into foot washing. This is the first century context we need as we consider what Jesus is doing up there on that mural. He is doing disgusting, menial slave work. Another context we need to appreciate what is happening in this mural is understanding what 19th century Universalists believed about Jesus, the folks who built this space. Our Universalist forebears left the Calvinist fold of the Puritans over the nature of Jesus' death and resurrection. The Puritans had a very dim view of humanity. Not really hard to understand either. Humanity, the inheritors, they thought, of the sin of Adam, had just declined and declined since then into a state of being mired in sin and depravity. A combination of drunkard, whore, greedy merchant, murderous, bully, sexual miscreant. Looking only at the worst of humanity, it's not that hard to recognize the Puritans' argument that we are unworthy of salvation. For them, Jesus' death and resurrection was unearned grace that could redeem those of us, only those of us, who showed signs that this was not our true nature. They showed signs of election, that we had been selected by God before we were born for salvation. Universalists studied the Bible and came up with a very different theology. They believed Jesus' death and resurrection wasn't about appeasing an angry God unhappy with human depravity. They didn't believe God was so unhappy with humanity that he needed to be reconciled with us only through the perfect blood sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. The Universalists read a completely different story. They believed God was so moved by Jesus' free sacrifice of his life and willing to descend into hell that God abolished hell entirely, liberated everybody who was there, and erased the need for salvation. Erased the need for salvation. After death, all would be saved without exception. A gift of grace for both worthy and unworthy. There might be, maybe, an atonement after death for those unrepentant sinners who had caused grievous harm. Still, in the end, all would be reconciled through God's irresistible grace. Okay, let's go back now to this foot washing and what it might have meant to the Puritans and other Christians as opposed to what it might have meant to 19th century Universalists. Without getting into the theological weeds, the Puritans were more concerned with whether Jesus was creating a foot washing ritual that must be enacted in the future, like the Eucharist, the ritual of communion. They decided no, it was more an act of humility before the disciples that foreshadowed the atonement. It demonstrates an attitude of humility the disciples should have before God. This isn't what the Universalists read in the passage. They asked of the passage, what does this reveal about God's love? Jesus, as the embodiment of God's love, reveals deeply and humbly what God's love looks like in practice, what it looks like in practice. Rather than wondering if this is a ritual that needs to be enacted, the Universalists recognized it as a call to service, with Jesus as the example. Let us now return to our Universalist forebearers who built this Universalist cathedral as an example of their faith for the nation. This wasn't built just for the people here, it was for universalism in general. What were they saying by putting this mural here? If you entered any other Christian church in the 19th century, even today, what you'd expect to see up here is a cross. We do have a little one down here, but the main focus is up there. Of course, the cross is the central Christian symbol. There is no dominating cross here as a primary focus of our worship. The primary focus here is the person they believed was the Son of God, the most high and holy being ever created, humbling himself. Remember, it's disgusting, dirty work. Humbling himself before his followers, doing the vile work of slaves washing feet. Jesus wasn't being selective either, ordering who was more worthy of foot washing and who wasn't. He washed the feet of Thomas, who would doubt him. He washed the feet of the disciples who would run away when he was arrested. He washed the feet of Peter, who would deny him 3 times. Most incredible of all, he washed Judas's feet, the man who would betray him. None of the disciples will show their courage and moral excellence in the coming days, yet Jesus loves them and humbles himself before them and washes their feet. Jesus is showing all of them what universalism is and means. It's not some doctrine about the afterlife, but as a practice here and now before he will die. At the center of the mural is Peter. Peter resists having his feet washed by his teacher, the one he already knows is far more worthy of praise and honor, saying, "You shall never wash my feet." But Jesus rebukes him, saying, "If I do not wash you, you will have no part in me." The kind of beloved community Jesus envisions is not hierarchical with some more worthy than others. You will have to let yourself be served, and you will have to be willing to serve. Both are required. This wasn't a soteriological theory, a theory of salvation for Universalists who built this building. They put foot washing into action. They built and staffed the Chapin home for the aged and infirm. They taught pregnant mothers how to care for their infants. They had a boys' school to rescue them from poverty. These are just some of the ways they put their faith into action. This mural is a symbol of the faith of the people who built this cathedral. Their faith in Jesus' commitment to and commandment to be served and to serve others. This mural is just one expression of our Universalist heritage and faith of those who built this cathedral. If you were to look at all of the windows, there are some back here, there's some over there. If you look carefully at each one, you'll see little short snippets of Bible phrases in script that point to their Universalist understanding of their faith. And this, of course, can create problem for contemporary Unitarian Universalists who are humanists, atheists, practitioners of earth-centered spirituality, those with a Jewish heritage, and maybe any who follow Greek, Roman, or Egyptian goddess traditions. We Unitarian Universalists love diversity as long as it's not too Christian. It's easy to say we welcome diverse beliefs. It is another to be willing to listen to that expression of those beliefs from this pulpit. I appreciate the sentiment that we don't want to scare away visitors who come on Sunday who don't appreciate our embrace of diversity. We don't want the curious visitor to hear a service on, say, Haitian voodoo religion and come away with a mistaken belief that we are a satanic cult. They might not stay long enough to learn about this West African religious tradition, particularly of the Fan and Yu in Benin, Togo, and Ghana, or that Voodoo means spirit or divine force. They might not stay long enough to realize how much overlap Unitarian Universalism has with this tradition. Hollywood films and sensationalist journalism has badly warped our perception by associating it with the racist trope black magic, zombies, and pincushions used to harm people. If I was your settled minister, I would want to have other visual symbols of the values and beliefs widely accepted in this congregation that communicate non-verbally who we are today. Yes, we do have lots of words on our walls. You can look around and see some of them. But visual symbols are much more engaging emotionally. This is particularly true from the outside of the building, which could easily be taken as an Episcopal or Presbyterian church. If I was a humanist or a non-practicing Reformed Jew walking by, I wouldn't probably even hesitate long enough to read any of that text. The building would tell only one story, the story of 19th century Universalists wanted to tell. And that is not our Unitarian Universalist story today. We are envisioning a radical new way to do religion that is widely inclusive and cherishes interdependence with all beings. It has a deep commitment to justice and equity. It has a deep trust that we are all growing and developing throughout our lives through learning and personal experience. And the way we respond to it all is through sharing our lives with each other and widen the wider community in the world. That is one way to interpret beloved community, and I hope you see some of that when you look at that mural. By washing the disciples' feet, Jesus was announcing the beloved community he knew he couldn't build because he would be killed. Jesus entrusted his vision to his disciples whose feet he blessed with his love. Those feet would be carrying his vision even if they didn't realize it yet. May we receive the blessing I'm sure the 19th century Universalists would want us to receive through this mural. While we may no longer believe what they believed, we can continue to build on their example of how to practice the values that Jesus embodied. May we continue the interfaith work of building beloved community right here together.